Look, the problem is, to boil it down, is that we're being told, cut government, raise taxes, that is going to be the way that we're going to fix the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, I was looking at some of the numbers last night, even in the Wall Street Journal, that in 1999, the U.S. government had half the budget size that it has now. And who can say that our country was not better off then financially? The taxes were lower. There were more jobs. NAFTA and GATT hadn't had a chance yet to deindustrialize our country. And so now the budget is double what it was just 11, 12 years ago. And the solution is a $38 billion cut in the budget that was just leavings or crumbs sitting on the table that hadn't been spent in last year's budget. That's the Republican and Democrats' idea of cutting the budget. And they're saying, let's kick welfare moms off their welfare, when even the Washington Post last year reported $640+ trillion in global derivatives, with the United States signed on to, quote, bail out the banks for more than 60% of it. So let's just say it's the lower number of $600+ trillion that the Washington Post reported on, and not what other economists have argued about here on air, that it's over 1,000 trillion, some over 1.5 quadrillion. So that's the issue. And they're maneuvering us now into all of these huge tax increases. And you've got the mega rich out there lobbying for higher taxes through their different George Soros media organizations. They are out there pushing everyone, pushing the working class to believe that the middle class is the elite that has basically engineered the crisis we're in, so that the ultra-rich can scapegoat them and then raise taxes on the middle class. And you do the math, it's very simple. It will do nothing to reduce these deficits. It will only put the economy into more of a free-fall stall. So it's a very simple equation. The big mega banks are all over the news, on record for years, saying raise taxes, raise taxes, raise taxes, raise taxes on the rich. And they say that's somebody making $125,000 a year individually, or $250,000 in a couple. And why is that? Because General Electric and Google and the rest of the Fortune 100 pay almost no taxes. Then they say, well, our employees and our CEOs and our executives pay taxes if they're part of the U.S. division. Most of them are part of these international divisions and are based in countries with almost no corporate tax, no income tax. You know, if you do the math and look at it, China has much lower taxes than the U.S. Of course, because they are incentivizing the factories and the jobs and the brains to travel there, to move there. I mean, I know so many Americans that have multiple degrees who've left America to go live in China, to go live in India, to go live in Mexico at the factories, because the jobs aren't here. And the very same multinational corporations that have moved overseas were the ones that lobbied for the regulations to be jacked up here and to be lowered in other countries. They're the ones that got the tax incentives to move overseas. They're the ones that push to get the animal ID and the premises ID to shut down the small farms and ranches. And then they get waivers for their big agribusiness. It's very simple. Are we hearing about getting rid of the repeal of Glass-Steagall and bringing Glass-Steagall back to stop the derivatives? They're creating more of them now, counterfeit money that we've now been forced to sign on to. Are we hearing anything about dollar devaluation, a tax on everyone? Are we hearing anything about the private Federal Reserve? Are we hearing anything about the trillions of dollars secretly pumped out overseas and to domestic corporations here in the U.S.? Your tax money going to hundreds of newspapers, scores of TV stations, multiple TV networks, think tanks, propaganda groups. It's incredible. It is a completely unlevel playing field designed for the globalist to consolidate all of the markets, all of the industries, the entire economy. And I know I keep hammering on this and hammering on it because I listen to talk radio, I listen to liberals, conservatives, all of them, and none of them get any of it. And even mainline libertarians are like, good, kick all the welfare queens off their welfare. Good, get rid of Social Security. It's a fraud to begin with. And yeah, it is a fraud, but it's all people's got. And if you got rid of it, it wouldn't fix the problem. Only getting rid of the Federal Reserve. Only slashing taxes across the board. Only getting rid of the income tax, which was created the same year as the Federal Reserve and is in the Communist Manifesto, written by the bankers and sold as the People's Rebellion. Just like today, George Soros-funded groups on record go take over Bank of America, and they don't go in there and say, arrest the bankers, get rid of the Federal Reserve. They say, raise taxes on the rich. But then the rich are a person making $125,000 a year. That's who they're talking about. Not raise taxes on George Soros, who's back in the news saying raise taxes and we could absorb more debt. Because he sits above those rules. He's part of the corporate power structure that's exempt from almost all of the taxes. He's part of the corporate power structure that's allowed to create fake derivatives. They take the trillions in banker bailout money that they get interest-free. Then they go out and loan it for 5%, 10%, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Now some of the yearly interest rates are 79.9%. But they don't just stop there. Loaning out to the general public is a small part of their business. That's why many big banks are saying, we're just closing having public accounts. We don't even want your money. You're like, you don't want my money? Okay, we'll take it, but we'll give you 0.5 percentage point because we don't even care. We don't need it. You know why they don't need it? Because they can take those trillions in banker bailout money and they can, for every dollar they get, loan out 10. And that's under the previous pre-1999, pre-Glass-Steagall repeal. After that, they can take $1 and they can leverage it out thousands of times, according to the economists we've interviewed and talked to. And I mean people like Professor Black, the former top federal regulator. He said there's thousands of times they can leverage it. Thousands of times. $1, thousands of dollars. So when you see headlines about $3.3 trillion that the banks are in debt with and they need more money, ladies and gentlemen, the banks created those derivatives to take over society. When those derivatives weren't known to be fraudulent, they were able to buy up much of the society, much of the infrastructure with it. And now they hold the whole infrastructure hostage because they have infected every financial instrument, every financial system with the derivatives that are hundreds of times bigger than all the real assets in the world. And so they have successfully Siamese twinned all of their fraud into the pension funds, into Social Security, into the police pensions, the firemen pensions. They've done it. They've got us right where they want us, totally dependent on them. It's like having a giant tumor that is half your heart. And if they remove the tumor, you don't have a heart anymore and you die. That's what they've done. And everything they do is about dependence. Everything they do is about you having to get permission from them to do anything. You got to get a license to have a garden in your backyard. You got to not even get permission. You're not allowed to make your children's lunches and send them into the public school. Your children aren't allowed to play dodgeball. Again, just everything is prisoner training. And I know I've been ranting about this. It's just, I'm going to get more into it later after our guests leave us. And I want to get into Obama's speech as well. Here's some of the other financial news that I was mentioning. And I said it incorrectly. Banks face $3.6 trillion, not $3.3 trillion. Wall of debt, IMF says. And the IMF is posing as our savior, the consortium internationally, for groups like the Federal Reserve, the receivership arm, and they're now posing as the experts, telling us about the problems they created and saying the banks need trillions of dollars or there could be a collapse and a default globally tied into governmental currencies, and private stocks if we don't prop them up. Well, what did they ask for just 3-4 months ago at Davos? They said, we want $100 trillion. we want to issue, and we want your governments to sign on to give it value, promising your tax money as the backer of it. This isn't backed by gold. This is backed by us, the taxpayers. That's the collateral. It's you. It's me. It's all of us. They want $100 trillion. What will they do with $100 trillion? Well, they'll leverage it. And nobody got rid of the repeal of Glass-Steagall. Nobody brought Glass-Steagall back, and they got rid of similar laws in every country. What are they going to do with that? They're going to leverage it to the infinity. But what is 10 times 100 trillion? It's 1 quadrillion. Under the old fractional reserve banking system, they want 1 quadrillion backed up by you, the taxpayer, and they're telling us about a limousine liberal. They're telling us about a welfare queen. They're telling us, notice, though, in all the Republican attacks, and even Democrats calling for cutting welfare, nobody's talking about taking the precious illegal aliens' welfare. More than 2/3 on it. See, that's how the illegal aliens can work for less, because they're getting the supplement of the welfare, and they get paid under the table. Just like all these good old boys that don't understand economics, and they say, I'm glad we've got the biggest prison population, 4 million in the world. I'm glad that tens of millions of Americans have criminal records, because we're law and order. Oh, really? You're glad that there's a 98% federal conviction rate? They're convicting innocent people? Oh, you're glad that there are hundreds and hundreds of private prisons doing call centers, furniture, license plates, electronics, on average for 25 cents an hour? They'll have the factory right next door, just like they do in China, and they'll bus over the prisoners every day to work 8 hours in a factory, getting 25 cents an hour. Oh, you still don't get what I'm saying if you're a new listener. You're competing against the illegal aliens that'll work for half, and the illegal aliens are competing against people that work for 25 cents an hour. What is that over 8 hours? Can you do the math? What's 8 times 25 cents? Can you do the math? They're working for $2 a day. And you're like, good, they can work. Oh, yeah, I like it. You don't know what you're doing, idiot. You're a moron. And you're like, well, what about, I hear about violent criminals being released. Why they let a murderer go after 3 years? Because they've got actuaries. This is a business. They release the violent offenders to menace the public, and they keep the peaceful pothead in there for 5 years. Because the peaceful pothead is going to be a better worker. You know, today I almost didn't do the show, because I don't like to blow up and yell and scream, because it exhausts me and it gives me a headache. You know, when I yell and scream and blow up, folks, that's real. I mean, I personally feel like throwing my coffee cup through the window. I feel like tumping this whole desk over, and I feel like just trying to run away somewhere. Because I got to sit here and study this and look at it and know what the bankers are doing and know their whole program and understand how evil it is and understand how wicked they are and know how it's all premeditated in their own admissions. And then I've got to hear how still stupid the public is when I read the editorials and I listen to callers to talk radio and other people's shows. They don't have a hope of a prayer if they don't get religion and wake up to the New World Order. I mean, we are far beyond anything I ever imagined. And this is just the beginning. I almost turned around today and told him to do a rebroadcast. And I rarely get in this type of nasty mood. But, I mean, I am just... I'm so sick of watching people being conned. I'm so sick of watching people having no inkling of how the global system works, no geopolitical understanding. They don't even know who the 3 branches of government are. They don't even know what the Bill of Rights and Constitution is. They've been deliberately dumbed down by television and the culture and the public schools, and we're multi-generations into the dumbing down now, where we are in so much trouble. And then those of us that are awake are listed in Homeland Security training memos and documents that are constantly being leaked, where the government is preparing to release the military and the police against us. We are a nation of spoiled brat children. mentally. Doesn't mean a lot of Americans don't work hard. And I mean, it's just like the reactors blowing up a month ago in giant mushroom clouds and fuel rods spraying. And I went and pulled up online to make sure I was right what a fuel rod looks like, that particular design. And then I blew up the video here at the office of the explosions, and I could see the fuel rods in the air. And I said 4 weeks ago, plus, when the reactor 3 blew up, I said, those are fuel rods. And then nuclear workers called in and said, yes, they are. And then 3 weeks later, the New York Times said, yes, the Japanese government now admits fuel rods were blown up to a mile away. And I had to get the emails and the calls, and I'm a fearmonger, and I'm saying fuel rods were blown everywhere. I went and looked up the design. I went and looked up the fact that they were storing them on top of the facility, and I could see the stinking things blowing up into the air 4,000 feet. And the radiation settling in across the United States. They're now reporting today in mainstream Japanese TV stations that, yes, much of Japan is now going to be uninhabitable. Told you that a month ago. And it's not because I'm smart, folks. That's what's so frustrating about this. I mean, normal people, if they saw giant reactors blowing up and we're downwind in the U.S. and I have children, a normal American, a normal human would go with the internet, all the knowledge of the world in front of us, and look up a General Electric Mark I MOX reactor. And I went and looked up the other General Electric reactor. And I went and looked up the other Japanese reactors. And I went and looked at their design. And I went and looked at articles. And I went and looked at locals 2 years ago protesting. They're storing a 644,000 fuel rods there. And I went and looked up what that particular fuel rod package looked like. And I blew the video up, and there are the stinking fuel rods. I mean, I'm not smart, folks. I got a family downwind from this, and I spent days researching it so I could tell you what was happening. I know about the Federal Reserve, okay? I know about what sodium fluoride does to you. I know they're putting uranium in our water here to sterilize us. I know the government runs giant child kidnapping rings, okay? It's all documented. I know we're in trouble. I know how bad it is. And I'm sick of people living in denial out there. Even you so-called people that claim you're patriots or whatever. You're either COINTELPRO, some of you out there, or you're just jealous that somebody actually works and has the truth. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to survive and warn people. We don't have any future if we don't stop these people.